Martin Bill, winemaker in Somerset. Making wine for over 20 years. They'll share with us how they got here through the process of making the wine. During the evening, you will not only be educated, you will have a chance to taste three of their award-winning wines. So please welcome Bill and his assistant, Jean Marie.
I got a wire here. Okay. There we go. I got a green light on. All right. My partner, boys, ready to take this off? Yes. All right. My partner Mark and I, and other partner Pete, have been making wine not for 20, but for almost 40 years now. We started in my garage, and we learned how to ferment grapes. My brother-in-law's 80-year-old grandfather taught us how to make wine. He knew how to turn sugar into alcohol. He didn't know how to make wine. If you drank what he made, you'd get pretty drunk, but it didn't taste good. It took us years to figure out how to make the wine. So after about almost 30 years, Mark and I decided, let's open up a place and teach other people how to make wine. In New Jersey, we have a license called an Instructional Winemaking Facility License. And our winemakers in Somerset, we opened 6 years ago, and ever since we've been making, trying to make good wine. Our goal is to make the best wine we can make. There's other facilities in the state that do what we do, but the problem is they don't, they give you choices. You can buy the cheap grapes, you can buy the medium grapes, you can buy the expensive grapes. Well, even though I fancy myself as a good winemaker, the trick in making good wine is to start with really good grapes. If you start with really good grapes, all you have to do is not screw it up. You have to ferment the grapes, make sure nothing bad happens, no oxygen gets into the wine, and you shepherd it through the process. So we buy all the premium grapes at our place and charge the medium price. Figured that'd make everybody happy. And we've never made a bad barrel. Nobody's ever complained about the barrels. Now, the winemaking process, can we move to, there's a picture of grapes. Let's start with that. That's our old place, this is our barrel room. We have events there too. It's Falmouth. But we moved out of Falmouth, we're now in Hillsborough. We're not in Falmouth anymore. Keep on going, there's a slide with grapes. There we go. Now, if you've ever seen grapes in the grocery store, you see that powder on them. You bring them home, you try to wash it off. It doesn't wash off real easily. Because it's not powder, it's yeast. Everywhere that grapes grow, wild yeasts are out there adhering themselves to the skin. That's yeast. And if you pop one of these grapes and the juice started to run over that yeast, it would start to ferment. And if you took a couple of grapes, popped them, and threw them in a shot glass, in a week to 10 days, that fluid would be wine. All the alcohol it's ever going to have in it will be in there. The alcoholic conversion process takes place in 7 to 10 days. So, if you drank that, you'd probably get drunk if you had enough of it. But you wouldn't want to drink it because it tastes horrible after 7 days. I mean, unless you spent a lot of time in prison and enjoyed that kind of prick wine, But what happens, that's the first process, it's the fermentation process, the alcoholic fermentation. 7 to 10 days. When people come into our place, Okay, go to the next slide. And they order the grapes. If they want to make Cabernet, we order Cabernet grapes. They want to make a blend. If you ever had Opus wine, it's a blend of Cabs, Merlot, Syrah, and Petit Verdot. And we know the ingredients of that blend. Any kind of blend you want to make, we can figure it out. And we order those grapes. And you come in, if you order the grapes, you come in and it comes in these 36-pound packages like this. And you take the grapes and you put it into what's known as a crusher destemmer. That's the first phase. Go to the next slide. Let's see if we have the crusher destemmer in there. All right. Yeah, no more grapes. I'll talk about the grapes again. You see, when you're looking at the grapes to make sure they're good, you look at this, the stems too. The stems, you want them a little bit darker. So if you ever go to Carrados or any of these places that sell grapes, you want to make wine, you look at the stems, they got to be a little bit brown. Because if they're bright green, you put those into the wine, you crush the stem, you get the resin into the wine, which you don't want. And if you taste the grapes, and you bite into them, and the seeds are crispy, that's what you want. You don't want them soft and mushy and resiny. Because when you ferment the wine on the skins and press the skins later on, we'll talk about that, you're squeezing the resin out of there. You don't want that in your wine. So you want darker stems that are a little bit drier with less resin in them. You want crispy seeds. Good. Here's our crusher destemmer. That's the back of it. I think we have another picture of the front, but just leave it for there now. You throw this is the Isle of Lucy stage. You're all old enough to know what I'm talking about. We don't step on grapes anymore. This takes the grape and it rips it off the stem and it shoots the stems out of that side of the machine. The grapes come through the tube and into the fermentation vat. So the first process to crush is basically just crushing the grapes and taking the stems off and throwing them into that. Now what will happen right after you do that, because that wild yeast is on the skins, it'll start to ferment right after you crush the grape. We don't like wild yeast, because wild yeast, if you're in France, okay, they get grapes from France, that yeast has been around for thousands of years. Okay, real hardy yeast, and it will ferment all of those grapes. In the United States, when we get these grapes from California, they have good grapes, but they have weak yeasts. If you just let that yeast ferment the grapes, what's going to happen is if you had a high sugar content in the grape, the yeast, as the yeast was turning it into alcohol, it converts the sugar into carbon dioxide and alcohol. If you watch this stuff ferment, it looks like it's boiling because the carbon dioxide is being let. But the problem with wild yeast is sometimes it dies off when the alcohol content gets to be about 10, 11%. Now you want your wine to be 13, 14%. You don't want 10 or 11. And if your wine has enough sugar to go to 14% and the yeast die off at 11, you're going to have a weak wine and it's going to have a lot of residual sugar in it, sweet, which you don't want. It kind of sheds. Not that good. You know, so you want to ferment all of that sugar out of there, and you want to have a nice dry wine. So what we do is we put potassium metabisulfate, it's a sterilizing agent, into the wine. The first right after we crush it, kills the wild yeast. We wait 24 hours, we put commercial yeast in that'll live in an alcohol content that we will predict what the wine's going to be. If the wine has a Brix level, which is a sugar level of 25, it'll be 14.5% alcohol if you're doing a 50-gallon barrel. If it's 26, it'll be maybe 15.5. We had a 27 last week. That's going to be about 16% alcohol. It's almost 4. But we had to get a yeast that would live in that long enough to ferment all the sugar out to get it to that level. Now, a lot of people, when you get a high sugar level in a grape, what they do is they put water into the tank and they water the wine down so the alcohol level isn't that high. It stays at around 13, 14%. But, you know, you put the water into wine. You know, I mean, there's only one guy that I know that can change water into wine. It's not me. And he ain't working for me. So we ferment all the alcohol out. and all the sugar out, bring it to the high alcohol. If it's too high, and you know it's high when the wine starts to burn your throat. You know it's a high alcohol level, but if you swallow it, the alcohol you'll detect in your throat. So when you feel that, it's too hot. Port is so juicy and flavorful, that's 17, 18, sometimes 20%, but you won't taste the alcohol because it's a lot of sugar and a lot of other things going on. It won't bother your throat. So you don't want to get the high alcohol. So what we do instead of throwing water in the wine is we blend it with a lower alcohol wine at the end, so it's all wine. And that's what you want to try to do. If someone's telling you to put water in the wine to bring down the alcohol, it's not going to be that good. As a matter of fact, and I know because I've been doing it for 40 years, you know, I know everything to adjust wine, acid levels, pH. There's always things you can do to the wine, but every time you do that, you change it. You're putting chalk into wine to bring the acid levels down. Well, you could just blend it with a lower acid wine, do the same thing. But you put chemicals into the wine, and a lot of the big vineyards, they do that because they want everything to be perfect. I have a good friend of mine who's a doctor who I started teaching how to make wine. He's gone mad. He took the UC Davis winemaking course, and he's a chemist, and he's just nuts. He calls me at 11 o'clock at night saying, you know, I just dropped so many grams of potassium carbonate into the wine, and I want to get the acid down to a certain amount, and I want to get it to 70 because it was at 65. Now, red wine, acid levels go from 60 to 80. That's the range. I said, Dean, it's in the range. What are you doing? He goes, I want to get it perfect. And he always says to me, how come your wine always tastes better than mine? I said, I don't put crap in the wine. Leave it alone. You shepherd it through the process, and it'll be better. So that's what we try to do here. That's the crush. That's the first step. The Idalusi stage. Next step, can we have the next one? There's the blade. That takes the grapes down to the crusher over here that's crushing it. Next slide. These are people doing the crush. They take there's people, I don't go through these, there's people doing it. They're taking the 36-pound crates of grapes and they put it into the crusher and distilling. Now this is what it looks like after it comes out of the crusher distiller the first time. You see this stuff in here? That foam? That's the wild yeast starting to ferment. Okay? And we get that, so it's all gone. The next day we put it in, it starts again. Now, the fermentation process, it's really interesting. If you see this, it's very fluid, it's very wet. After the fermentation starts, the grape skins start to float to the top of the barrel. Okay? And when the wine, the fluid goes to the bottom. And if you just left it like that, it will ferment underneath the skins, and it'll get hot and warm. But at the end of the 7 to 10 days, when it's all converted, it'll look like rosé. There's no color to it because you're not fermenting it on the skins. The skin imparts the color and the flavor to the wine. So when you ferment it, you want it wet. So we take these devices here 3 or 4 times a day, and we punch down the cap. As it flows to the top, it gets really dry and hard. And sometimes it's really hard to punch it down, but you've got to keep that wet. In the big wineries that have, 500 gallon or sometimes 1,000-gallon containers, they pump the wine from the bottom up to the top and let it flow over the top. And these are 50-gallon vats that we make it in. So every one of these turns into a barrel. So we just punch these down. And we were able to get them wetter and a lot more color than that. So we do that. Let's go to the next picture. We're doing some more. Then, when 7 to 10 days, when we're taking specific gravity of the wine every day, and we're watching the specific gravity, which is the thickness or the viscosity in engineering terms. It's not thickness, it's viscosity of the wine. Coming out, and we're measuring that, and as the alcohol is converted from the sugar, the water is thinner. And there's a float that we use, a specific gravity, a refractometer. Hydrometer. Thank you. I'm getting old. I just had my 65th birthday. I'm starting to lose them. Some of you guys might know. So we do that every day. We check, and you see it dropping down every day. When it gets to be, we have about 3 to 5% sugar left in the wine. It still has to be fermented. We call the people in who are making the barrel, and we say, okay, you're gonna press. So they bring their, most people that make it, it's not like one person comes in and makes a barrel of wine. It's families, it's friends, it's groups like you guys that will come in and make a barrel. You know, they come in, they bring food, they sit around, they listen to the music, they do the press or the crush. And the press or the crush takes about 20 minutes. Okay, you got like 10 people, 20 minutes. And then you're there for 3 hours having a good time. So the second time is the press. They call everybody back, they bring more food, they put the music on, and they do the press. And this is when, right before they come in, we take a pump and we pump all the juice out from, we let the skins float to the top. We pump the juice out of the bottom, and then they come in and they just take buckets and throw the buckets into the press. Let's see if we have a picture of the press. Here, these guys are taking the buckets. This guy here, he's a grandfather. He has 3 grandchildren. He makes 3 barrels every year. This is one set of grandchildren. This is his son, that's his son's wife, this is his grandchildren. He makes 3 barrels. One for each of the families. And she's the best bottler. She's content. She was bottling. And bottling just gets a little sloppy. And she just moved her grandfather, which is, Grandpa, let me handle this. And she did the whole barrel, didn't spill a drop of wine. And when she was done, she figured out if she took the wine spout and she put her glass underneath, she can get some wine. She says, I gotta try this. And she does this. I said, Mom, is this okay? She goes, yeah, go ahead. And she took the glass, she spun it around, she looked at it, smelled it, tasted it, and said, okay. It was a very educated 10-year-old. Okay, let's go to the next slide here. It gets a little sloppy. They're just taking the buckets and they're taking the skins out and they're putting it into the press. We'll get to the press here somewhere. Just keep on going. Oh, that's my. Okay. Here we go. More press. Okay, sometimes this is pectic enzyme. Right around here. No, it's before this. We sometimes put pectic enzyme into the skins that eats the skins, or deteriorates the skins and makes them basically fall apart. And the pectin in the grape, it dissolves it better and gives it more flavor. So it's a wonderful thing to use. It makes the grapes a lot redder and a lot more flavor. That's one of the things that we do put in. We do specific gravity, we check acid levels, we check for sulfites. I think these standard additives that we do. Sometimes we put acid in at the beginning. If the acid is low, before you make the wine, you can enhance the tartaric acid in the wine by adding acid. But you can't do that after the yeast starts to ferment because it'll kill the yeast. Put it in before and bring the acid level up in the wine. And it's really not that bad. It's tartaric acid just with the wine. Sulfites we use to sterilize the equipment, and sometimes they kill the wild yeast, but the sulfites evaporate out of the wine. So at the end of the day, commercial wines have about 180 parts per million of sulfites. Our wine has about, when we bottle it, put about 30 parts per million, just to keep the bad bacteria at bay. You can't taste it, it's barely detectable. 30 parts versus 180 parts. This stuff is a preservative. A lot of the commercial wines will have it in it because it's sitting on a shelf in a liquor store. Okay, and there's difference in temperature. So the sulfite, that's why you have 180 parts per million commercial wine. It'll preserve the wine. If you took one of our bottles and put it on your kitchen counter next to the toaster, and every morning you were making that toast, and that thing was warming up to 90 degrees and cooling down to 70 and doing that. Ours would go bad in about 5 months. The stuff with 180 parts per million, that could probably sit there for a year with that kind of variation in temperature. That's how well it preserves it. But you don't want to be drinking sulfur. I can taste it because I'm not used to drinking it. So, but anyway, next slide. We'll go into all this, but malolactic fermentation. It's something that very few people are aware of. Everybody knows about the converting the sugar into alcohol and carbon dioxide, or there's alcohol, sugar into alcohol. That's what fermentation is. Right after the alcoholic fermentation, for about a month and a half, 2 months, the wine goes through a secondary fermentation called malolactic fermentation, which malic acid is converted into lactic acid. Malic acid is the stuff when you bite into an apple, that kind of crispy, biting acid. Lactic acid, if you ever had a Chardonnay that was oaky and buttery, that buttery flavor is lactic acid. All red wines go through malolactic fermentation because you don't want to have that acidy bite that you have in a Sauvignon Blanc in your red wine. So we let them all go through malolactic fermentation. Some of the whites that we make, we inhibit the malolactic fermentation. We just have malic acid, like Sauvignon Blanc. Have you ever had that? It's like you drink that, you swallow it, and then just the flavor just bursts into your mouth, and then it goes away just like that. That's the malic acid. It's quick, it's crispy, it's biting, and it goes away. Lactic acid is that buttery oaky Chardonnay where you ready to go. You can taste it for 15 seconds before the taste goes away. It just lingers in your mouth. They say it has a better mouthfeel. Malolactic fermentation is a bacterial fermentation. Bacteria is in all wine, and it'll happen if you just let it alone. But sometimes you got to give it a little push. We always put additional bacteria in the wine, so it'll go through that phase, and we know it goes through it. Because what happens is, when all those bubbles come up in regular fermentation, you tell it's fermenting because you see the bubbles. But in malolactic, instead of having like 100 bubbles come up in 5 seconds, one bubble will come up every 2 minutes. So it's really easy to miss it going through malolactic. And when malolactic usually happens, when you're making wine now, it's getting colder. So the wine's getting colder, the bacteria is falling asleep, and it gets to be December, and if it hasn't gone through, they just sleep through the winter. Then you have to look at your wine in March, you say, hey, let's put this into a bottle, you put the cork on it, you put it someplace where it's warm, the malolactic bacteria wake up, and they start bubbles in your wine. And the cork's on it, so now it becomes champagne, or a fizzy red wine. So you gotta be really careful, there's ways to detect this, and you got to be careful to make sure that you make sure it's true malo before you put the cork on. Okay, let's see what else we have. Alright, once we put the wine into the barrels, we're just waiting. After the press, we put the pressed wine that we squeeze into the barrel, and we put the free-run juice and that in there, and then we just let it sit there for 2 or 3 months. And all of the particulates, the little pieces of skin and stems and seeds that are in there will fall to the bottom of the barrel. That's why we don't want to drink the bottom of the barrel. It's bad. It's just muck. And after about 2 or 3 months maybe, we'll come in and we'll call everybody back in, they bring the food, listen to the music, and we wrap the barrel. We suck the juice out of the barrel, we put it into a stainless steel container, we turn the barrel over, we clean all the muck out of it, the lees, they're full of lees. We turn it back up, we put the wine back in, we top it up with new wine, and we put the bung back on the thing and let it sit there for 4 or 5 months. Most wine, it won't have enough particulates left to cause any kind of deep, lees after the first racking. We generally do 1 racking. Sometimes if the wine's a lot of lees, we'll do 2. So after we're done with the racking, let's see what the next slide is. Bottling. That's the best part, because you come in and you're getting your wine after about a year, almost a year of doing this and waiting. it's sitting in the barrel, it's aging, it's finding itself, and you come in, well, hey, how you doing, partner? You come in and you do the bottling. Let's see what we have. Here's our bottler. You come in, you throw 6 bottles into there, it automatically fills them up. You take the bottle down. Next slide. You put the that's the bottler still. It fills up, it stops by itself. Another person bottling. Keep on going. Here's the corker. You take it from there into the corker. You hit the button, the cork goes in. And we have those hand ones you can use too, but nobody wants to use those. This is a very expensive Italian machine, you know, but you put your finger on the button, and if you leave it there too long, it just keeps on putting corks in the same bottle. I don't know why it does that. You know, you only get one cork bottle, and this thing is a cork feeder, and you gotta turn it by hand. Everything's automatic, but you gotta turn that by hand. And if you're not paying attention, you're bottling wine and you put the caps on them and there's no cork in there because you're not paying attention. People have come back to us after a while and say, hey, something's wrong. The wine's coming out of the box. I said, let me see. Bring it in. Take the skin off of it and there's no cork. I said, what was doing wrong? You gotta watch that. Once you put the cork in, we have this thing that shrink wraps the caps on it. And people make their own labels. Put them in the bucket, put them into the case and bring them. That's about a year, the whole process. And again, wine, and when you have wine, if you have more than a bottle at a time and you want to store it, people always say, how do we store wine? So first, my best advice is, God made wine in 750 milliliter bottles, so you can have 2 glasses apiece and finish the bottle. Okay? If you have extra wine, somebody's not drinking enough of it. So that's the best way to make sure your wine's good. Drink it. Don't stick it in the refrigerator. If you have oxygen in there, it'll last a couple of days. It's not going to go bad in a couple of days. But if you leave it in there for a week, it's not going to be that good. If you have a bottle that you're saving, keep it in a place that's dark, has the least amount of temperature fluctuation. If you have a basement, stick it in a corner in the basement that's on the ground if you can. Put it on the side so it keeps the cork wet, and just let it sit there. Wine doesn't like light, it doesn't like temperature fluctuation, and it doesn't like sound. If you put your wine bottle next to a radio and you're playing that radio all day, it's gonna go bad. That's why red wine is in a green bottle, so it hides the light. White wine, you don't save white wine. You drink the wine. It doesn't get better with age. But the reds are in green dark bottles because you're trying to protect it from light. Keep it in the dark place with little sound, little temperature fluctuation, and maybe you need a little bit of, if you have a cork in it, you need a little bit of humidity to keep the cork away. People think that, our wine, Mark can tell you too, we've made wine that's lasted 20 years, but our wine you can drink after a year, because we make it that way. A wine that you have to wait 20 years to drink, when you first put that in a bottle, you'd probably spit it out if you drank it, because there's so much tannin, so much going on in there, you wouldn't be able to drink it. 20 years makes it drinkable. So you don't really need to save, like when you make our wine or you get wine from the store, unless it's a really, really, special bottle of wine that was made in a certain vineyard at a certain time, and it's going to age well. Whenever you drink the wine, don't save it. I always tell people that make it with us, well, how long will we keep this? I said, keep it until you think it's really good. And when you say to yourself it's good, finish it. Drink it all. Don't save it. Because saving it, sometimes you lose it. You have a really good bottle of wine, you're saving it for a special occasion, 7 years go by, and it was really good after 5 years. Now it's on the downside. So, unless you really watch it, I mean, there's places you can look to see if you have a bottle of wine, go in and see if it's drinkable now. Should I hold on to it? Yeah, but most of them, 3 or 4 years, it's going up, and then it just levels off. Yeah. If you can drink the wine now, it's not going to get much better over the next couple of years. What else do we have here? Any more pictures? Oh, more wine. People make all kinds of interesting labels. I tell people when they make it with us, don't put labels on the wine. Bring them home, and you have this wine, you have a couple cases of it, and you want to go to a friend's house, so you can go on the Avery label and just design a label, have a picture up on your phone, put it on the label, and make a nice label that give it to your friend at the during the holidays or for a birthday. I mean, it's a great gift. I give it to my UPS guy. Every time he comes, he doesn't leave his little notes on my door. He calls me and responds his bill. He comes back to my house and give him a bottle. I get my UPS. Yeah. I mean, the pizza guy, I call the pizza guy. His wife likes Cabernet Sauvignon. Always give him a bottle. He's there in 10 minutes instead of 15 minutes, I always get service and a nice little extra toppings on it. It's like a currency. Anybody have any questions? We have wine. We're going to taste some wine. Some of the wine we make. We're going to start off with, what are we starting off with? Is it Jean-Marie, and that's Mark. Mark's going to help her pour. Maybe. We're going to try some, is that Cab? We're going to try some Cabernet Sauvignon first. This is straight Cabernet Sauvignon. So we do a lot of blends because the blending could take the edge off of the Cab. The Cab is a strong wine, and this is only, I think, a couple years old, and it still has a little roughness around the edges. Okay, you'll see the next one, we blended the Cab with some Merlot and some Syrah, and you can see the difference in it. Go ahead.
Yeah. Our temperature is a wine refrigerator, all wine refrigerator, in keeping the wine fresh.
Well, if it's white wine, it works very well. The red wine would be fine too. It keeps it at a certain temperature. That's the whole point of it. If you can do that at 57 degrees, I mean, forever, it doesn't move, that's good. But if you have it sitting in your living room with the TV glass, it's gonna be affected from that. If there's light going into the cooler, it's gonna go back. You're better off just sticking it down in the basement or in a closet someplace in a corner. Okay? It's nice and dark, but not a lot of temperature fluctuations. But those are good. I mean, I'm not saying they're big, but when you make a barrel of wine, they're too small. 30, 40 bottles. Go ahead.
Where do you get your corks? And are they real corks?
We have real corks. Corks are very expensive. Ours are natural corks, but they're not the top level cork. Because if you did that, you're spending like 75, 80 cents a cork. That's whether you're paying for the bottle. I mean, it's amazing. And the freshness from the screw tops, they keep the wine much fresher than corks will. But we don't use those. Yes, everybody likes to pull the cork out of the bottom of wine. So do I.
A lot of better wines now.
Oh yeah. Mostly all the Australian wines have twist offs.
Is there a deficit with a twist off as opposed to
No, it keeps the wine very fresh. Now, if you're drinking this Cab, everybody's tasting the Cab. There's a little bit of the acidy taste to it. Right? You feel that? I mean, it's a nice Cab, and in another year that's going to go down. But this is 100% Cab, and a lot of people who will make wine will blend the wine so it's drinkable a lot sooner. Now, don't be afraid if you see wine in the store that's a blend. I mean, if you see a French wine that says you'll see a house blend, or they'll say what's the other term that they use? What's that? Like a house wine, or any kind of blend. You'll see all these fancy labels from France, but the blends, because they're not touting them to be from a certain place, they can use grapes from different areas and blend them together to make a really nice wine. If you're drinking Grenache from a certain area in France, you're drinking Grenache only from that area. And if you're doing a Côte de Rhône blend, which is Grenache and Syrah, they both have to be from that area. But sometimes the Syrah is better in one area and the Grenache is better in the other. Those house wines, okay, will blend the best wines together, and they can't call it an estate wine, but those wines could be better than those because they're blending them to taste.
A lot of wines are blends, even if they're not called a blend, right?
Yeah, many wines, when you see 100% cab, it's got something else in it. You know, depending on where you're getting it from, like California, you can have up to 20% of the wine not be what you're saying it is. You can say it's a cab with 80% cab in it. Okay, and it's not all cab. What you're drinking now is straight Cabernet.
These come from the same vineyard every year?
We try, when we find good grapes, we try to use the same vineyard. We can get, at some vineyards, we can get the same rows that we used the year before. That doesn't mean the wine's going to be as good, but chances are it'll be good if they were good last year, unless you know there's a fire running through there or something happens.
All California grapes?
We get them from California, Oregon, Washington. And then in the spring, we get them from Argentina, Chile, South Africa. There's two different zones for what you got the equator. If they took a string, went up to Napa Valley, and then took the string and went down the other end, you would be in Chile. I mean, and if you saw pictures of these vineyards, they look alike. They look the same environment.
So some of the cheaper wines, they taste the same no matter where you buy it.
Excuse me?
Some of the cheaper wines, they will taste the same no matter when they produce it.
Yeah, I
How
mean,
do they manage that? They basically add the sugar or whatever. There's a way for them to make it.
you can always add sugar, you know, if the sugar is less, you know, I mean, just because a wine's cheap doesn't mean it's bad, you know, I mean, there's a lot of cheaper wines that are very good wine, you know, it's just that they make a lot of it. The price of wine usually goes up because there's not a lot of it out there. I mean, they're really expensive wines, they only make, you know, 500 cases of it, you know, and if it's really good, and you really like it, you know, and you didn't buy it, you know, before it was bottled, you're not gonna be able to get it. So, and then as time goes on, if you really want to get it on the secondary market, you're paying a lot of money for it. And it's not that much better. It's just that it's rarer.
But how do you make that a wine consistently taste the same?
From year to year.
From year to year? Because you know,
It's the same.
grapes are changing.
It'll seem like it's the same, but their years will be different. But it's the same blend. Like you're going to taste this. The next one you're going to taste. Jimmy, why don't you pour this CMS? This is the Cab Merlot Syrah. It's a 60% Cab, 20% Merlot, 20% Syrah. We make that same blend every year. So as long as we use the same grapes in the blend, it'll taste very similar. But some years will be a lot better than other years because the Cab was better that year, or the Syrah was more flavorful that year. You know, it'll taste the same, but if you taste them, you know, next to each other, they're different. You're only thinking it tastes the same because it has that same flavor to it.
No, I mean, I'm talking about like,
The ménage de trois. Okay, the ménage de, yeah, that's it's Google, yeah. I mean, they're very much the same, and these, if you get them from the same vineyard, You know, and if it's 100% if it's the same vineyard, it's gonna be the same because it's the same plants, you know? But these big distributors, like if you go to Sterling Vineyards out in Napa Valley, you know, there's the estate grapes and the stuff that you buy here in the liquor store in Jersey. That Sterling is not the same. They buy those grapes from Central Valley mass-producing vineyards, and then they make it at their vineyard, but the grapes aren't from there. But it's the same blend.
Where is this? It says the seeds and stems.
Okay, all right. We're saying, how do some people make cheaper wine consistently good? And, you know, it's the same blend. Usually they're blends. And they just, and sometimes they'll adjust the blend of the Cab Merlot Syrah. If the Merlot isn't that good, we'll just put a little more Syrah in there. So it's the same blend, the flavor is really nice. The blend is similar. But unless you have a bottle of the last year and a bottle of this, you're not going to be able to tell. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Explain to me what Bordeaux means. The second question is, I'm just told Bordeaux.
Yeah.
So what's a bottle of Bordeaux?
Well, Bordeaux, the question is, what is a Bordeaux? Okay? Okay? Bordeaux is a French wine, and it's the wines that grow in the Bordeaux region of France. Okay, so if you buy a French Bordeaux, it's going to have Cabernet, it's going to have Cabernet Sauvignon, it's going to have Merlot, it's going to have Petit Verdot, and Mark, what's the fifth one in the Bordeaux? Petit Verdot and Cab Franc.
So it's a blend.
It's a blend. And there's a number to it. The Cab is 75%, 15% Merlot, 5% Petit Verdot, and 5% Cab Franc. Okay, and it's all from Bordeaux. Now, there's a place in California that makes a wine called Opus. Okay, and it's 75% Cab, 15% Merlot, 5% Petit Verdot, and then 5% Petit Syrah. Change it by 5%, but it's a Bordeaux blend. And sometimes you can put 50% of Cab in, 25% Cab Franc. You're using the same grapes, but it's different amounts. Usually the Bordeaux blends are very similar.
I remember some of the Italian people making wine, and they seem to use a lot of the Alicante.
Alicante Boucher, right?
Is that a
my friend Mark used to make that, right? Alicante Boucher.
is that a lesser priced grape?
It's a lesser priced grape with a lot of sugar in it.
Yeah.
So the alcohol level is usually pretty high. I mean, you can make a decent Alicante Boucher wine. I mean, but you got to be careful with it. You got to make sure you're not drinking 18% alcohol. Choke on. Yes.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but I was just wondering, the wine that you just gave us, it was very, very nice. And what do you think a bottle, 750 milliliter, regular wine bottle, what would it cost in the bottle chain of Hillsborough?
Oh, that level one, probably about $30. $30.
30.
Yeah. Now, the wine that we make, you know, by the barrel, it comes out to about $13.50 a bottle. And that's what that is. And we make, you know, an Opus or Bordeaux blend, very good, you know, that probably, you know, we had a woman from the American Wine Society came in and judged our wine one year, and she was just in Bordeaux, and she tasted all these Bordeaux's and judged them, and she came into our winery, and she was there with somebody else, and she said that she stood up and she was speaking in French. No one knew what she was talking about, and then she converted it back in English, and she said that she had been in Bordeaux for 3 weeks tasting wines and rating them. She goes, this wine, this Bordeaux you make is better than anyone else. Because they had a bad Bordeaux year in France, you know, and we did make a nice one. So, I mean, it's the same grapes, you know, so it's it's just when we can get a good cab from Napa, and then our 15% Merlot we're getting from Washington because we know it's really good, and the Cab Franc from Oregon, you know, and we make a really nice wine because we don't have to say, we don't have to get them all from the same spot.
You sell retail at all?
No, we can't. Our license, we're in New Jersey, right? The liquor laws in New Jersey are really weird. I can't sell you a bottle of wine, but I can sell you a barrel of wine.
If you make it, you have to make it.
You have to make it. You have to come in. Well, most people are coming in and eating and drinking, having a good time and throwing it. But we kind of shepherd it through the process for you.
What's the actual cost, the approximate cost for like who's applied to come in or?
Well, a barrel is like $3,200, you know, and people, 34, I'm back last year, because of the trucking from California. 3,400, it's probably $14 a bottle here.
Yeah.
So, but people come in with groups, you know, I mean, people get 2 cases, they're like 10 people, they walk away with,
10 people, 20 cases.
2 cases apiece.
How many
Yeah.
days, how many bottles?
You get 240 bottles, 20 cases, 20 cases.
240 bottles a barrel. We have 60-gallon barrels, we'll give you about, what's it, 280?
Yeah, you get
Yeah. But, yeah, I think 240 is a good number.
Order a whole barrel, so you're talking about 20 cases.
Yeah. And some people come in and they make a barrel by themselves. There, a guy that comes in and makes 2 barrels by himself.
I have a big base.
That's when you have a problem.
And a big base.
He gives it away. He's a paver. He pays driveways and stuff. Just gives it away. Yes.
Tell us about the effects that the fires have had on smoke effect for this current yield and for future yields.
Well, the smoke is only really, it's not burning the vines as much as it's affecting the grapes. So if the grapes are ready to be picked and there's a fire and there's smoke, it can get on the grape skins. So what people are doing is when they're crushing the grapes, okay, they crush them, they put these 2 wheels that go in, they crush them, they move them apart a little bit, so this is like smash them up. It gently breaks them open, and then it throws them into a vat, and they're treated very gently, okay? So we're not getting the skins, okay? When you press the skins, you're not pressing them really hard and squeezing that smoke out of it. So if you're careful, you can do it, but most, you know, we see where the fires are, and our distributors and people that they get us the grapes. I mean, we're not going to buy grapes that are smoke affected. So, you know, if there's a lot of fires in California, we'll get them mostly out of Washington and Oregon. Our kind of Oregon's on fire too, so we get them out of California. You know, so it could be bad if they made the wines, but you know, and the price goes up when the grapes are bad because of the smoke. That's it.
Can you talk about the barrels and how you choose your barrels, and where they come from, and how aged they are or not aged?
We use mostly American oak, medium toast. Toast is the amount. When they put the barrel together, they burn the inside of the barrel. Okay? A heavy toast is a really charcoaly taste, you know what I mean? Medium toast, you know, it's if you get it too burned, I mean, it can affect the wine really easily. You may be able to keep the wine in that barrel for a couple of months. In a medium toast, we can keep it there for 6 months on a new barrel. On an older barrel, you can put the wine in the barrel for the entire time. It's aging. And barrels last, you know, maybe up to 5 years before we put it out of service. But you get a new barrel. We got new barrels in this year. We got 15 new barrels. And you put wine in there, you got to keep on tasting it, because if you leave it in there too long, you know, I have the job of tasting it to make sure it's okay. It's a tough job, and someone's got to do it. Yeah, but if it gets in there too long, it's like chewing on a board. I mean, it'll go away after time, but you know, we take it out of there after 2 months and stick it in a neutral barrel until it finishes the aging in a neutral barrel because it's got too much oak in it. Now there's French barrels and Bulgarian barrels, and you can a oak barrel, American oak barrels is about $450, maybe $500, depending on where you're getting them. French barrels are like $900. Now, to me, six,
American.
man, we're getting robbed.
I know.
But the French barrels are like $900, and and I've made wine with French barrels, and they say, well, you can taste a hint of vanilla. For that much money, I'll skip the vanilla, and you can barely taste it. But if you tell somebody, can you taste the vanilla? They'll say, yeah, I do. You have to have a real discerning palate to tell the difference between barrels. Yes.
Can 10 guys go in on a half a barrel?
Sure, but you're going to be very thirsty. Thirsty.
Answer is yes, Stanley.
I said sure.
So the follow-up question is, can you go in on the multiple barrels with a taster?
So however you'd like to do it, listen, if you have 10 guys for half a barrel or something, then you have another 10 for another half a barrel, I'll do 2 halves. Okay, maybe half a Malbec, half a Cab Sass, and then you can
CMS.
yourself or CMS.
The next wine you're going to drink is a Malbec, okay? This is a straight Malbec from California. It's not a South American Malbec.
And the grapes in California are all the varieties, they're excellent grapes. We love California grapes. So even like the Malbec, I think it's coming from South America. Malbec from California, real take.
Yeah, wonderful grapes.
Wonderful products.
You notice on the wine menu,
Yeah, you see from South America. South America. It's a cheaper. When you count for importing them from South America, if you can go down and get it prepared yourself, they're really cheap. But when you got to ship them up here to New Jersey, it's about a little less expensive than the wine. So they're bringing bottled wine to South America. That's what they're doing. They're not bringing grapes. Yes.
My wife and I took a trip a couple of years ago to Tuscany, and must have gone on about 5 or 7 wineries. And I'm just wondering, do you have an opinion as to whether the grapes in Tuscany are better somehow than those in California? Or is
They're different. They're just different. There's different strains of grapes. Everywhere you go, like in New Jersey, you go to a vineyard in New Jersey, you go there. If you've ever been to how many people have been to a vineyard in New Jersey? A vineyard in New Jersey. They're very nice places. You go there, you sip the wine, it looks real pretty, and you buy a bottle. And you get home, next week you open it up, and you say, "Oh, this doesn't taste as good as it did at the winery," because you're in a winery, The grapes in New Jersey that grow in New Jersey, those places cannot grow the Vinifer strain of grapes, which is Cab, Merlot, Malbec, Sangiovese. All the stuff you've ever heard of is a Vinifer strain. That's all of the grapes that you mostly drink. In New Jersey, our growing season is 60 days short to grow a Vinifer strain of grape, because what will happen if you plant a Cabernet Sauvignon vine in New Jersey, the buds will start coming out in March, and then there'll be a freeze to kill the plant. Or they'll start having grapes in late September, and they're not ripe until November, and then the frost comes, kills them at the end. You need 60 more days. Maybe with global warming, we'll be able to grow some good grapes here. But right now, if you're drinking good wine from a New Jersey winery, they're importing those grapes from California. Because all they have to do is put 20% of their grapes into the wine. And they grow things called Chamber sand, things that you've really never heard of before. They're hybrid strains of grapes. They're not bad, but they're not really good. So when you blend them with a California cab, you know, you're taking a really good cab and you're really reducing it down by putting some chamber sand in it. Because you say, no taste on the end, you're not aware of. So, but it's not bad if you dilute it with California grapes.
How many barrels did you make last year?
60? 60. That was for me. Yeah. In Hillsborough. We're in Hillsborough.
Can you explain to the gentleman about plastic cups, how it changes?
Oh yeah, guys. Now, they told us not to bring glasses because you're going to have glasses, and I see they got you drinking out of plastic cups. Don't drink wine out of plastic, okay? Because it does affect the taste of the wine. You ever see, I mean, I had a friend that was the owner of Flemington Cut Glass. And when he retired, he travels the world discussing the types of wine glasses you use with different wines. You know, these things, I mean, when you drink a wine from a wine glass, a bowl of wine, you're putting it up to your mouth, and your nose is encompassed in the glass. 80% of the taste of wine comes from your olfactory senses. So, if you're not smelling that wine, you're not tasting it. That's why people, when they take the wine glass, they swirl it around, they're looking for the legs, they try to do a white surface, they're looking to see on the rim of the wine if it's bright red or is it starting to turn brown, that is really an age. And then you smell it. I can smell wine, I've been drinking it for a while, making it. I can smell a glass of wine and know exactly what it's going to taste like before it tastes. I don't have to taste it to know what it's going to taste like. I can smell it. And I know what it is, because I can smell the cab, I can smell the below, I can smell it all. But you don't have to know what you're smelling, but you got to smell it. If you held your nose and swallowed it, you wouldn't be able to taste it, right? You got to stick your nose, and the glass is very important. The other thing about the glass is, when you're drinking white wine, it's a long, thinner thing with a smaller mouth on it. And when you take it and you pour it over your tongue, it goes down the center of your tongue, and it doesn't hit the outsides of your tongue, which is where you're going to taste the acid. You're just shooting it down the center of your tongue, and that's the way they want to taste white wine. The reds, it's a big white thing. They want to get the red wine all over your tongue and get all the different places in your tongue that taste the different things in the wine. The acid, the tartness, the sweetness, and the alcohol in the back of your throat. When you taste wine, you should look at it, smell it, taste it, swirl it around in your mouth, get your tongue, just coat it with the wine. And when you swallow it, you let a little air with it, and you'll get all the flavor out of the wine that you need. That's there.
Can you explain how we go about doing that?
Doing what?
Doing the barrel.
Doing the barrel?
Yeah.
Well, let's get together and figure out who wants to make wine. And then, if you want to, if somebody wanted 2 cases, somebody wanted 5 cases, then you know how many barrels it is. A barrel and a half, a barrel and a quarter. Just add up all the cases that you want and figure out how much you want to make.
That's over a period of a year.
It takes a year. It takes a year to make the wine. You can't rush it. Yeah, you gotta let it go. Now, the whole trick about making wine, and Mark and I have been doing it for over 4 years now. When you make it the first year, you make enough to make it last into the second year. But the trick is, when you wait a whole year to drink your wine, you get it. You're going to drink it, and then you get it in August, and by Thanksgiving, you're out. Now, you made another barrel in September, well, you ain't gonna see that until July. The trick is to get that first barrel last a year. So That's the deal with the port, just pretty nice.
Hey, Bill, you talk about aerating, using those aerators for red wine.
Mhm.
Does it make a difference, or?
If it's an old wine, yeah. Old wine's been sitting in a bottle for 20 years or 15 years, I would aerate it, or at least let it open up and expose it to the air. I had a bottle the other night, it was 30 years old, and we tasted it after we just opened it up, we poured it. I wanted to spit it out. I said, this is terrible, this is not good. And then my friend said, let's throw it. I said, well, let's sit over there for a little while. We ate a little bit more. About 15 minutes later, we tried it again. It was better. Another 15 minutes of exposed to the air, it was unbelievable. And we finished the bottle. He said, maybe we should wait. I said, no, it's good, drink it, because it'll do this, then it'll just go right down again, if it's that old. So, if you have time to wait, just wait. You don't have to aerate it, just let the air hit it. If you really didn't have a glass of wine, put it through the aerator. It's better if you just let it sit there. It'll accommodate itself to the air, the oxygen.
All right.
What you're drinking now is what are they drinking now? Malbec. Oh yeah. Now that's a straight Malbec. Now that's a little bit. It seems a little lighter than the other two. It's a lighter wine, but it seems sweeter. But there's no sugar in that wine. It's totally dry. That's the juice. It's the juiciness of the grape. I like to say it's juice. It's not sugar. It's just that the flavor of the wine. It seems like it's sweeter because it's juicier. It's like Sangiovese. Anybody ever drink Sangiovese wine? It's usually blended with Cabernet, and we call it a Super Tuscan. Really nice wine, because it's got the body and the mixture of the Cabernet and a little bit of the juiciness of the Sangiovese.
I have a question. If you like one commercial wine, say for example, are you able to kind of like to produce similar taste? It won't be 100% the same.
We do it all the time.
Oh, really?
But give us some time to figure out what the blend is. Sometimes we have to drink a lot of it to figure out what's in it. We just did a prisoner's blend last year. You ever had that? Unbelievable. It's very good.
It's time for coffee and cookies. We gotta figure out who's interested and how we, what's the mechanism? What's the next step?
Well, we're here. Just figure out who wants to make it. I mean, we're around. I mean, you don't have to do it tonight, but if you're interested, let us know. We'll be here for a while. And if you want a glass of wine, and you want to taste it, don't eat the cookie. Okay, eat the cookie after you drink the wine. Okay? There's certain things that go with wine, and cookies are not one of them. You won't be able to taste anything if you have a cookie. Thank you very much. Oh yes, guys, if you are interested in making wine, we only have another couple of weeks of working the grapes, because the season we're well into the winemaking season in California. So we got to order.